Imagine a city built not merely on stone, but on bones. Beneath every cobbled street, every polished facade, every gaslit alley, London hides more than history. It hides whispers, screams, secrets that no guidebook dares to print. Imagine a London where every cobbled street whispers forgotten screams. Every shadowed alley holds a chilling secret. We are not talking about your typical tourist traps. We are diving headfirst into the city's hidden horrors, the unsettling tales woven into its very foundation that history books tried to bury. Forget everything you thought you knew about London. What if beneath the iconic landmarks lie tales so gruesome, so deeply unsettling, they've been intentionally erased? Prepare to uncover the truly unseen, the gaslit history of a city haunted by its own horrific past. Tonight, you and I step into that London. Not the postcard city of glittering palaces and busy markets, but the one that shivers under its own weight. The one where shadows don't merely fall, they linger. Where the glow of a lantern doesn't banish darkness, but reveals it. Feel it, even now, the faint damp press of fog against your cheeks. Hear it, the wet hush of footsteps on slick stone. The slow, unkind hiss of a gas jet catching flame. The tiny click as the lamplighter moves on to the next iron post without ever looking back. Somewhere, a door shuts too quietly. We'll move slowly. We'll listen carefully. And when the city decides to answer, we'll be ready. Because this is not the London of dreams. This is the London of graves. And once you enter its alleys, you may never look at the city the same way again. Keep walking. There's a light up ahead. But everything it touches turns darker. Victorian London. The histories parade out their elegance. Invention, empire, industry. Ladies in silk glide past gentlemen with silver-tipped canes. Carriages rattle. Newspapers roar with headlines about progress. The city appears well-lit, well-ordered, confident, like a stage set at the height of its performance. But stages are built to hide what lies behind them. Step off the Grand Avenue and into a side street near Whitechapel. The gaslight flickers overhead, immersing its blue-orange flame. The glow spreads thin like watered milk, painting everything in damp yellows and bruised glaze. The air tastes of coal and wet iron. The walls weep tar and time. On one side, a row of windows, lace curtains, carefully pinned, carefully washed. On the other side, a timber door swollen by rain, its paint blistered into small, pale eyes. A rat, full as a purse, sidles into a crack as your boot heel scuffs the cobble. From somewhere deeper in the narrow throat of the alley, a cough that doesn't quite sound human. Then, silence. That bandage of a sound that only covers a wound if you don't look too closely. The facades are grand. Yes, Gothic arches and Corinthian pillars, the stern romanticism of public buildings that promise order. But the backs of those buildings tell the truth. Behind them, tenements fester, families stacked like ledger lines, breath stacked upon breath, heat stacked upon heat. Illness moves not as a guest, but as a landlord. Hunger knocks politely at first, then lets itself in. The gaslights, how we romanticize them now. But to the poor, they were a coin of false comfort. Their glow did not warm, it exposed. Against their sickly radiance, you could count the ribs in a boy's chest as he slept sitting up, could measure the wet black crust in a sick room's basin, could trace the map of a bruise on an arm that wouldn't name its source. The city's radiance was the kind that lets you watch yourself fall. A seamstress crosses the street with a parcel pressed to her ribs. Her shoes are thin. The water finds her ankles. The cold finds her bones. A man in a hat, brim low, collar high, pauses beneath the lamp, checking his watch, though there is no reason to do so. The watch does not shine. The time does not change. He waits anyway. The flame flutters as he passes. The shadow it throws of his shoulders looks like someone else entirely. London splits itself here. There are two cities, the public mask and the private pulse. The mask dazzles, gilded and loud. The pulse is the damp throb behind the teeth. If you listen for it, you hear the truth. A city that breathes through alley lungs, that circulates secrets like blood, that stores its shame where light pretends to fall. Look down. Between the cobbles, the seam of the street is a dark vein. It runs toward the river. Everything does. But if you think the city's darkness ends at the curb, wait until you learn what lies beneath your feet. Layer upon layer of silence that still remembers your name. Beneath the bustle of London life, an empire of the dead slumbered. The city was, quite literally, built on graves. For centuries, the dead were pressed into churchyards that could not refuse them. The soil swelled with bodies until the earth forgot what it meant to be earth. The ground grew shallow, the graves stacked, buckled and nested like ribs. In heavy rain, the past rose. Not metaphorically, but with a sour sigh that puckered the streets. People said the churchyards wept. People said the drains spoke with a voice that echoed through the pipes at night. People said many things. The earth said nothing, and yet somehow said everything. A child in a Sunday coat digs with a stick in the corner of a parish yard and uncovers a button, a cufflink, a shard of a tooth. He pockets it. He tells no one. He sleeps with his mouth closed, as if the tooth might recognize him and return. A workman near Holborn lowers his spade and strikes not rock, but skull. He knows the first knock by sound. The skull looks upward with a patience that feels impolite. He tips his hat absurdly and calls for the foreman. There is a silence before the men gather. The day continues, but something in it has been moved 2 inches to the left. Down in Spitalfields, a terrace coughs and feeds another row of bones into the daylight. Bodies layered like pages, like receipts, like a book a city wrote about itself and then tried to burn. The parchment holds the scorch marks. The words still read. And beyond the parishes, there are the pits. The great gouges dug when death arrived not as a visitor, but as an event. Wide, deep, hurried. Names uncounted, faces uncharted. The city learned to keep walking. Londoners said the dead never quite left. After the night rain, a chill sometimes rose from the paving stones, and with it came a smell like old bark and iron. The dogs whined without knowing why. Lamplighters kept their eyes at shoulder height and never looked down. When a house was built over a burial ground, small things happened first. A pan tipping itself from a shelf, a fire taking too eagerly to a fresh log, a mirror clouding where no breath had passed. One evening, in a kitchen behind a shop that sold boiled sweets, a girl heard a knock, not at the door, beneath the floor. 3 short taps. She pressed her ear to the boards. She thought she could make out the sound of someone moving heavy cloth. The next day, they found nothing. The day after, they found 2 buttons in the ash bin without a coat to claim them. The third day, the girl refused to stand where the warm tile stopped and the wood began. She kissed the crucifix and did not pray for the knocking to stop. She prayed to never understand what it wanted. You might say these are legends. You might say that people make stories to give fear a spine to climb. But the city does little to disagree. Each time a trench is opened for a pipe, each time a foundation is poured, a shovel meets history. Sometimes the shovel wins, sometimes the history does. Close your eyes and imagine the entire map of London like a palimpsest. Neighborhoods scratched over graves, markets set on bones, houses perched on the hum of a wide, low choir that no human mouth ever sang. Imagine the way the ground would feel underfoot if you could suddenly hear it, like a drum with a heartbeat too slow to measure, like a mouth rehearsing a word it will never say. The underworld of London is not hell, It is a city of citizens without addresses. Their streets do not appear on maps. Their courtyards have no doors. Their windows look inward. Their lamps are steady. There are construction men who will not work a night shift near certain corners. Not because of ghosts, but because the ground feels wrong there. Soft as bread, where the plans say it should be stone. There are archivists who have handled so many old documents, they can tell by the color of the paper when a neighborhood learned to lie about what it built upon. There are birds that never land on a particular chapel roof, though no one has ever seen a hawk nesting there. The dead do not walk. The dead weigh. They press upward. They give the city its shape. We call it settlement when a building sinks over time. We call it myth when a family leaves in the morning without their chairs because none of them want to go back for the final one that still faces the corner. Listen, do you hear it? The faint, hollow rattle, not unlike tea in a cup, but slower, more deliberate. It is the underworld, shifting its bones to make room for one more story laid on top. Graves were only the root. The branches reached into daily life. Death in London was not hidden. It was purchased. It was displayed. It was counted out in coins and measured in applause. To the Victorians, death lived next door. It ate at their tables. It slept behind their walls. It sold them fabric for mourning and flowers for graves, lockets for hair and frames for photographs that would be the last blessed image of a face. Death was a neighbor, a merchant, a tutor. They learned its alphabet from childhood and spoke it fluently by marriage. The gravediggers knew the ground like a tailor knows a pattern. They could tell you by the pitch of the spade where last year ended and the century began. There was a rhythm to opening and closing, a tempo to lowering and raising, a choreography nobody wrote down because everyone knew it. They smoked their pipes and told jokes that were only funny within a gate of iron and ivy. Body snatchers, resurrection men, worked the other shift. They did not steal from death. They rented, temporarily, what death could not guard in the small hours. They had soft boots and quiet ropes. They had a knack for moving through grass without making it move. They crawled low, spoke little, balanced profit against risk, and learned which families sat up all night and which went home after the priest had said enough. Anatomy schools needed bodies in a world that called them sacred and scarce. The resurrection men supplied them. They moved through London like a rumor you could touch. They left the ground apparently as they found it. Boards replaced, earth tamped, stones set back, save for one mistake now and then. A ribbon caught on a splinter, a claw darker than the rest, a boot print pointing toward rather than away. In the morning, there would be no proof, only a peculiar emptiness. And there is nothing heavier than an absence when it belongs to someone you loved. Everything of the body had a price. Hair for wigs, teeth for dentures, skin for needles to practice upon. Bones for cabinets of curiosity, dusted and displayed under bell jars that turned grief into objects. Mourning itself was an industry with fixed costs and flexible margins. Black crepe, jet beads, veils long enough to drag through the street and come home wearing the city like a second sorrow. Executions were scheduled, public and punctual. They drew crowds that hissed and hawked oranges, argued about vantage points, and rehearsed their gasps. There is a cruelty in a published death that masquerades as civic order. It tells the living, we can end a life neatly, so our chaos is an illusion. But if you looked at the faces in the moments before, you saw something less neat. The itch to see what should not be seen, the hunger that refuses to name itself. The mercy that arrives too late and will be praised for arriving at all. A boy sits on his father's shoulders near a prison gate. He doesn't know what the word sentence means, only that the crowd draws closer to a place no one would visit if there were no crowd. The boy drops his orange. No one notices. It rolls toward the curb and stops against a grate. Years later, the boy will stand in a lane at dusk, and the shape of that day will return without telling him what it is. He will feel his throat tighten and will not connect it to the bright, perfect fruit that chose to be still beside the iron teeth of the street. Inside certain houses, death waited like weather, expected but no less devastating. A mother lays out a dress for a daughter who will not wear it. A father oils a pair of boots that will never learn mud. Photographs are taken of the dead as if they were sleeping, because sometimes the living need a lie they can hold in their hands. Hair is braided into bracelets, worn close to the pulse, proof that what is gone can still sit quietly against a vein and learn its new rhythm. Meanwhile, the city laughs, drinks, works, courts, prays, sins, eats. The macabre and the mundane share a wall thin as paper. You could be buying walnuts from a street cart, while a delivery cart creaks past with a long, narrow box under a gray cloth. The vendor weighs the nuts, his thumb heavy on the scale, and tells you a joke. You laugh. Behind him, the cloth shifts. You do not see it. You do not want to. In the mornings, laundresses scrub sheets until their knuckles bloom. In the afternoons, children chalk games onto the stones over whose undercroft old coffins sleep lower than any roots. The chalk leaves bright hieroglyphs on the city's skin. Rain erases them. The bones turn softly in the dark, like a sleeper seeking a cooler part of the pillow. In a back room where the shutters never open, a clock ticks with a heartbeat's stubbornness. A woman in mourning counts the seconds out loud, knitting the rhythm into her breath. In the next street, a baker pulls a new loaf from the oven and cracks it with his hands so the steam runs up his wrists. A small boy watching thinks of nothing but the way the crust sounded, like coal that forgives you. Everywhere, the city makes room for what it cannot refuse. Loss, profit, spectacle, mercy, appetite, silence. It files them like papers in a cabinet that will never be opened by the right person at the right time. Still, the drawer slides easily. But trade and ritual were only daylight masks. At night, the city whispered names in places that do not appear on any tour map. Rooms that lock themselves, staircases that count wrong, alleys that return you not to where you began, but to where you should never have gone. There are places in London where the air tastes like we have coins. There are corners where your footsteps fall half a second late, as if the stones must first decide whether they will allow you to be heard. There are doors that open onto rooms that have memorized every voice except yours. A narrow mews off a narrow street ends in a brick wall that was added later. In the winter, no snow ever rests on the cop row of bricks. A woman used to live there who sang to the stray cats. She vanished into a summer so hot the candles wept to the floor. Now once a year, a cat sleeps on the wall and will not be woken. Not for milk, not for stones thrown by boys who want to hear what noise a cat makes when it learns the world can be unkind. The cat does not move. Its whiskers count the air. Someone hums the second half of a melody that has no first. There is a house. There is always a house, where a child's cry is heard in rooms that have held no children for a century. The cry is not always sad. Sometimes it is a bright, impatient sound, as if the child is bored and wants someone to play. Once, a caretaker left a ball at the foot of the stairs as a joke. In the morning, it rested in the center of the hall, as if a careful hand had carried it there and placed it down. The caretaker quit that day, not because the ball moved, but because when she picked it up, it was warm. A basement along the old line of a lost river keeps time badly. Clocks there run slow by exactly 3 minutes, even when replaced. Wine stored in that room turns as if it remembers a hand that last touched it before your grandparents' grandparents knew their own names. On certain nights, when mist drags itself low across the pavement, the basement smells like sodden wool and apples too green to eat. A stairwell in a public building counts 13 steps, but a boy once insists there are 14. He proves it by placing a coin on every step as he climbs. 1, 2, 3, and holding up the last coin at the top with a face so triumphant it makes a clerk walking by think of a firework just before it understands itself. The boy turns back to gather the coins. There are 13. The 14th coin has slipped between the riser and the tread and lodged where no hand can reach. At night, the clerk hears a rattle in the stair as if a small metal mouth is trying to speak. Ask the sewermen about the city under the city. Some will tell you nothing. Others will tell you too much. They know the forgotten outlets, the culverts that shiver in drought, the flues that cough in rain, the oval brick tunnels where you can walk for 10 minutes without seeing your lantern reflected in the water. They learn the vocabulary of echoes, the syntax of drips. Once a man heard something that did not belong to the river or the rats. The slow, hollow chime of a bell. He followed it until his light went thin and tired. He never found the bell. He never forgot the sound. Along the back of a marketplace, beneath a row of awnings that never entirely dry, there is a strip of wall that sweats in an exact rectangle. The plaster there will not hold a nail. The shopkeeper says it is damp. He smiles too quickly. If you press your palm to that part of the wall in the evening, the heat of your hand will not transfer. The wall refuses you. Months later, the shopkeeper will move to a new location 3 streets over. He will say business is better there. He will not say that in the old place, candles lit in the afternoon always went out at 7, as if the room were respecting a curfew that no one remembers who set. A lamplighter once swore that on fog nights, he could see a woman in pale silk at the far end of a particular lane, not moving, waiting. He tried to reach her 3 times. Each time, the lamp in his hand guttered, and the silk blurred the way a moth does when you refuse to admit it has landed on your face. On the 4th night, he kept his eyes on the flame and walked backward until he reached the main road. He took the long way home for 30 years. There are lesser-known yards that hold more history than the famous squares. Little gardens built over bigger griefs. A bench no one uses, not because it's broken, but because the tree above it remembers too much. A handprint appeared in the paint of a new door before it had dried. The builders laughed until the paint went hard. Then they laughed less. Then they stopped working at dusk, though the contract did not allow for it. Listen to the contemporary anecdotes, the ones shared in low voices because they are bad for business. A cab driver refuses a street after midnight, not out of fear of thieves, but because, as he says, the road wants you to turn around. A couple leaves a concert and takes a shortcut. Their phones lose signal at the same moment. The street turns into 2 streets. They arrive not at their hotel, but at a small square where every window is lit and every curtain closed. They do not see a person. They do not hear a bird. They realize all at once that the square does not care for them. They back out slowly, apologizing to a place that does not speak their language and does not need to. And yet, these stories are not warnings so much as invitations. The city is honest if you are. It will show you what you ask to see if you accept that you did the asking. There are, if you are willing, doors you can find, not made of wood or iron, but of attention. Stand in a certain spot at a certain hour, and you will feel the small give in the ground, like a cupboard panel someone forgot to nail. Press, and the city will let you look through for a breath or two at the rooms inside its bones. What you see will not be ghastly. It will be ordinary. That is the dreadful part. You will see a woman stirring a pot that has no smell. You will see a man sewing a tear in a coat that will never be worn outside again. You will see a child writing his name on a slate in letters that grow careful toward the end, as if a hand were guiding his. You will see them look up, not at you, but towards something in the space above you and to the left. And you will feel certain that if you turn, you will find nothing there. You will not turn. When the door closes, you will be back on your side of the city. The street will be the street again. Car lights will pass and leave their thin twin snakes across the windows. Someone will laugh behind you into a phone. You will wonder whether you imagined the hinge. You will wonder whether you were the hinge. The past does not stay buried. It learns to live upright. And in modern London, it still walks, under tube lines, through glass lobbies, in taxi mirrors, shaping a city that believes itself too new to remember. Victorian London was not merely a stage for shadows and whispers. It was a theater where the ordinary and the horrifying stood side by side, their boundaries blurred beyond recognition. To live in London in the mid-1800s was to exist in a world where death was a constant companion, not hidden away in sterile institutions, but woven into daily life. Picture a bustling market square. Women in bonnets bargain for bread, children dart between stalls, and men with coal-stained hands gin at the corner tavern. Now look closer. Just beyond the laughter and haggling, the body of a hanged criminal dangles as part of a public execution, swaying in the gaslit haze. For Victorians, such spectacles were entertainment, morality lessons written in blood and rope. The gravediggers knew this truth better than anyone. Beneath the gaslight, they worked tirelessly, lowering bodies into earth that had already been filled 100 times before. The ground was restless, bubbling with decay, and often the coffins were stacked so shallowly that the slightest rainfall exposed skeletal hands to the surface. And then came the body snatchers, ghoulish figures who prowled these burial grounds not to mourn, but to profit. They were men with spades and carts who sold freshly buried corpses to medical schools, where surgeons and students were desperate for cadavers to dissect. Imagine the horror of a family visiting a loved one's grave only to discover the coffin had been emptied, the soil disturbed, the dead stolen in the night. But even this macabre economy had its hierarchies. Some body snatchers worked for money. Others, however, whispered about the strange rituals carried out in secret basements, where bones were not studied under scalpel, but burned in fire, ground into powders, and sold as charms against illness or as grotesque talismans of forbidden power. And all the while, the ordinary life of London carried on around these grim trades. To step outside one store was to brush against the raw, unmasked presence of mortality. The macabre was not separate from the mundane. It was stitched into every cobblestone, every shadow, every sigh of the gaslit wind. If you think London's hidden horrors have all been buried under centuries of progress, think again. Beneath its polished veneer of red buses and royal palaces, there are places where the past still stirs, restless and unforgotten. Take, for example, the site of Aldgate. Centuries ago, during the Black Death, thousands were dumped into plague pits, mass graves hurriedly dug to contain the dead. For centuries, they lay undisturbed, until modern construction sliced into the earth and bones spilled forth like a forgotten confession. Workers reported strange occurrences, tools vanishing, inexplicable cold winds sweeping through sealed tunnels, and shadows moving where no light should cast them. Then there's the Crossbones Graveyard in Southwark, a burial site for the outcasts of London, prostitutes, paupers, and the unwanted. To walk there today is to step into an atmosphere heavy with sorrow. Locals say you can hear faint singing at night, as though the lost souls of the Winchester geese, the women once condemned for their lives in sin, still gather in mournful chorus. And what of the Tower of London? Its history is written in blood. Kings, queens, traitors, innocents all silenced within those cold stone walls. Visitors speak of phantom footsteps echoing in empty corridors, or of the ghostly figure of Anne Boleyn, her severed head cradled in her arms, gliding silently through the chapel where she was buried. These are not tales confined to dusty history books. They are echoes that bleed into the present. Reminders that horror does not vanish simply because we avert our eyes. London's soil is soaked with centuries of unrest, and every new building, every subway tunnel, risks awakening what once was meant to stay forgotten. Stand in London today, surrounded by neon lights and the hum of modern life, and you might think the past has finally been buried for good. But listen closely. Beneath the roar of buses and chatter of tourists lies a deeper rhythm, a heartbeat carried from centuries long gone. Step onto the cobblestones of Smithfield Market, and you walk upon the very ground where heretics were burned alive, their cries carried by the same winds that now stir modern traffic fumes. Stroll through Spitalfields and know that just below your feet lie the skeletons of plague victims, their deaths silent, their presence invisible yet undeniable. London is a city that wears its horror like a shadowed cloak. Every pub might once have been a morgue, every school a burial ground, every cheerful street a stage for executions. The city does not forget. It transforms, absorbing its terror into its identity, weaving the grotesque into the very tapestry of its charm. And that is the fascination. London is not just a place of history. It is a living palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten with every century, every life, every death. Its horrors are not buried. They are disguised. So next time you walk beneath the soft orange glow of a gaslight, or feel the night fog coil around your ankles, ask yourself, what lingers in the unseen corners? What watches from the graves beneath your feet? Because in London, horror is not a story. It is a presence, eternal, patient, waiting. Imagine you are walking alone through London at night. The streets are quieter now. The chaos of the day dissolved into whispers, carried by the fog. The gas lamps flicker faintly, each one casting a trembling halo of light that struggles against the vastness of the dark. Your footsteps echo against the cobblestones, but they are not alone. There is a second sound, a softer dragging noise, as if something follows just beyond your sight. You stop. The sound stops. You walk again, and there it is, always one step behind. You pass through Fleet Street, once home to printers, gossip, and the legend of Sweeney Todd, the demon barber who slit throats and baked bodies into pies. The shops are closed now, but the brick facades lean toward you, as though holding secrets they have sworn never to tell. A faint breeze carries the smell of something metallic, coppery, like blood. Then you turn into a narrow alley. The shadows here are deeper, the air colder. The walls seem to close in, and you feel the invisible press of centuries. This is no ordinary passage. It is a corridor of memory, and the memory belongs to the city, not you. And if you listen carefully, you will hear it. The whispers. Not loud, not clear, but present. Voices of the dead, murmuring in languages both forgotten and familiar. Some plead, some curse, and some simply laugh. The River Thames is London's lifeblood. It has carried merchants, kings, soldiers, and dreamers, but it has also carried corpses. In the Victorian age, the river was called the Great Stink, a foul artery clogged with waste, disease, and death. Bodies floated along its surface, sometimes discarded murder victims, sometimes poor souls who had ended their misery beneath its dark waters. Children played on its banks, oblivious to the swollen shapes drifting past. But the river is not only water, it is memory. Sailors whispered of ghostly barges gliding silently at night, their lanterns glowing, though no hand held them. Fishermen spoke of pale figures rising from the water, their mouths open in eternal gasps for air. And there are tales, even today, of people walking the bridges at midnight, feeling unseen hands grasp at their ankles, pulling them toward the depths. The Thames does not forget. Beneath its black surface lie centuries of secrets, of whispers swallowed by water but never drowned. Stand on its edge at dusk, and you will feel it. The sense that something watches from below, patient, waiting for the tide to rise. London has changed. The gallows are gone, the plague pits sealed, the workhouses turned into apartments or museums. But horror here is not erased. It only changes its mask. The gaslight may have given way to electric bulbs, but its glow still lingers in the imagination. Look down a street in Whitechapel, and you can almost see the flickering lamp, the dark figure waiting just outside its reach. Walk past an old pub, and you may feel the cold brush of someone standing too close, though no one is there. Horror in London is not a ghost story. It is a constant presence, woven into the city's marrow. It is in the damp breath of the underground tunnels, in the creak of an old door, in the silent chill that fills your lungs when the fog rolls in. And perhaps that is why London has remained the capital of the macabre. Not because of the murders, the plague, or the gallows, but because the city knows how to keep its horrors alive. It does not bury them in the past. It carries them forward, whispering them into every generation, reminding each passerby, you are never alone here. And so, as you leave this journey behind, remember, London is not just a city of history. It is a city of presence. Every street you walk, every shadow you cross, every breath of fog you take into your lungs carries centuries of sorrow, terror, and mystery. The Victorians lived in a world where death was everywhere. But perhaps that is not so different from today. We hide it better. We wrap it in hospitals, in silence, in denial. Yet London, with its crooked alleys and restless soil, reminds us that horror is never truly gone. It waits, it lingers, and sometimes it follows. When you walk alone at night in this city, do not look back. Because if you do, you may just find that London's past is still walking right behind you.